um, part of motivational interviewing is that it's not a modality. It's not like CBT or DBT or REBT. It is an acronym. It's not a type of therapy. It's not motivational interviewing therapy. It's not motivational therapy. There most certainly are ways of therapizing this. Been done. Motivational enhancement therapy would be one example, classic. What we're talking about today can be summarized in the phrase, the spirit of MI. This is an official teaching of that text. They decided to put this in there and devote a good third of the entire text to it because they've noticed over the last 2 decades of attempting to teach this to people that they're missing that. And the whole heart of it is in the spirit of being person-centered in that way of Carl Rogers. The person who is credited with founding motivational interviewing was a student of Carl Rogers. It easily could be seen as an evolution of what Rogers brought to the psychological field in his day. So starting with a moment of centering, moment of getting feet on the ground in whatever way we do. Not only does it help prepare me, like in just, like I do every day in anything, it actually is very congruent with the very spirit of motivational interviewing in a academic sense. Being able to be fully present and meet a person where they're at, be aware of my own impulses, and especially those to get in there and try to control, fix, or manage somebody when that might not be where they're at. It's just a helpful thing to do. In fact, it's even suggested in that. So thank you for engaging me in that first activity. I hope that some people were here at the first one, because there were some really good questions and comments that were coming up at the end. I spent most of the time talking, most of the time running through the basics of motivational interviewing, which we most certainly will get to again today. And my hope is that can be just a review, and then we can practice. We can actually attempt to do activities in a Zoom format. My guess will be that between all of us involved in this webinar, we can figure out all kinds of interesting ways to connect with each other. That's what I would like to do. It may not be possible to do that given that it's a webinar format, and we'll roll with that for sure. But I would just like to plant that seed right now, that if you are familiar with motivational interviewing, if you're familiar with trainings of MI that you maybe have given or have been in the past, I would like to call on you as a co-facilitator, especially when it comes to activities. Because if we have the number of people, I think it might be a little unwieldy to try to like break count off by 80, something like that. Probably not, but there's all kinds of things you can do to get to this felt experience of what we're talking about when we say motivational interviewing, okay? So with that, I'm gonna go to the chat and just see right off the bat if there's any questions or comments that we might be able to draw out of and start to get a sense of what motivational interviewing is. We've got 94 on now. So we got to count off by what, 47s? Okay, 1 to 40, just kidding.
1.
Okay, review, yes. It's great, reinforcing the principles of MI. I got my slide deck, it's coming. I'm gonna lay it on you. It's the same one as last time, but of course you gotta tweak it. Once I got in there, I was, oh, the color changed. There's different shapes now. It's a little more congruent with, directions. You'll see. It's pretty nice, actually, if I do say so myself. And then you'll see where I stopped. And it just goes back to how it was before. We'll reinforce that. The principles of MI, evoking. That's what it's all about. It's all about working with a person who has ambivalence about making an important change in their life. And that change it is good for us to get involved in that change because they're trying to change their life for the good. And we feel that responsibility to do that, either by our profession or whatever else, that somehow I have a role to play in this person's life to help them change that's appropriate. That's motivational interviewing. And that is a discernment in and of itself. Is this appropriate to use MI? Right? So, oh yes, practical stuff. Hand raising, love it. If I can see hand raising, that would be great. I can raise my own hand. That's cool. Oh, I can lower it too. Nice. That's probably good. If we break 100, everybody gets a chalupa. Okay. Where's this question? Mute. Okay. Anybody have any questions about MI? Otherwise, I'm just going to jump into this slide deck and we're going to do a lightning round. So I'm just going to start bringing that up. And if anybody's got questions, just throw it in there. Okay. Steve, if you can help too, because I'm not going to be able to watch the chat 100%.
Yep, I'm on it, Kevin. We're at 102 participants, so it's chalupas for everybody.
Hooray, chalupas. Just go ahead and send the reimbursement allocation to, well, let's talk to Steve about that. That's a joke. Please don't do that. Okay. Sharing screen. Here we go. Who can share? Oh, can I do that? Why am I in advanced sharing options? I think it's because I'm a host. She gave me privileges. It's always a mistake. Don't give Kevin privileges. There we go. Slideshow. Okay. So this was the title originally when we were talking about doing this back in the fall. And this title is born of our context as a globe. In my experience, motivational interviewing is about power. People who want to or who are faced with changing in ways like this, life ways, drugs and alcohol, ways of thinking that are toxic, making a change toward health in any way. There's ambivalence that goes with that, and often that ambivalence manifests in a sense of not having the ability to do it or tolerate it, or we empower. It's one of our roles as practitioners of MI. It's just that the way that is done perhaps could be counterintuitive to what we might do as, like, say, like the thing that we always do with somebody, maybe a family member who brings a problem to us. There's a certain way of being and talking naturally in that, where motivational interviewing often looks different. And the research shows that the way of motivational interviewing with limitations is predictive of change far more than non-person centered ways, where we don't consider the person as more valuable than the change they are facing. Okay. So evoking power. Evoke is a big word in MI. So I have a list of literature, the evidence-based practice, and hopefully we'll draw from each other on some practice-based evidence for the power of MI like we did last time. You'll see the word ambivalence a lot too. Here's the definition out of the book. Now there's 3 of them. This is where they get very, Bill Miller, one of the founders, defines it 3 times, depending on who you're talking to. This is the elevator speech. So I chose the clinician's definition, which is motivational interviewing is a person-centered counseling style. That's Carl Rogers right there. Motivational interviewing is Carl Rogers focused on one thing, the common problem of ambivalence about change. So when you hear somebody say, I used MI in this case, you might know nothing else about it, but presuming that that person is good at, knows MI, you know that this is a case of ambivalence in that conversation. That is the conceptualization from an MI point of view, regardless of what's going on in terms of the plot line. In the back of my mind as the clinician, I am thinking in a certain way. I have a roadmap about this human being and my role in their life. And it has to do with the fact that they feel two ways about this change that may have not even been brought up yet. I might not even have a clue why they're there. And as an MI practitioner, it's like a universal precaution. Like in the ED, when somebody comes in and I need to put hands on that person, I put gloves on. Right? Now we put masks on. It's just a way of being healthier. It's a way of safety. We just presume that everybody might potentially have illness that can be spread, and we don't want to spread it. The same principle of universality applies toward the map in my mind of working with a person in a motivational interviewing way, that I start with a presumption of ambivalence. And as the person talks, I listen to their speech. This is all what happens privately in the background. Listening to their speech, you can determine if they aren't ambivalent. And I mean that in either direction. It could be that they're already decided to make the change and they've already started taking steps. Well, that's how you know. Without you saying a thing, they will volunteer that I went to a meeting last night. That'd be an example of taking steps, action. Taking an action in the direction of the change is a strong sign that their ambivalence is either resolved or in the process of resolving. In the language of another mode, stages of change, they would have moved from contemplation to preparation. Stages of change is different than MI. They are not the same thing. They used to be together, trained together, and interwoven together. They rely on the same data about human change, and they arrive at different roadmaps of looking at the idea of human change, both useful. They are not opposed to each other in any way. They're super complementary. They both have taken strong efforts in the last decade or so to distinguish themselves or kind of get a little bit of distance so we can see that they're not conflated as the same thing anymore, or they never were, but it got confused in that way too much. So stages of change is a useful way of talking about where a person is in a change process. Motivational interviewing focuses on the contemplation stage of change for the most part. The person could be in, before that, they could be right in it. They might be in preparation, action, or maintenance. From an MI point of view, I can read that pretty quick by listening to their talk about the problem. We'll get more into that later. So here's some other nuggets from the most recent iteration of MI, the third edition, which came out in 2013. Not the stages of change. It is fun to talk about that with people. As of right now, amongst at least in the clinical world, most of the seasoned veterans who are my mentor, for example, people that are in a position of training, they were trained in the second edition. And they haven't had an update. Why would they really need to? Once you get MI, you get it. You know, it helps to re-up and practice and stay sharp, as with anything. And you may hear a lot of language that I won't be using, or I'll maybe even be replacing today. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with it. MI stays the same. You know, interacting with a person in determining, you know, how can I be useful in helping empower this person in my relationship with them? That's still the same task. They find more precise words based on their practice-based experience. And we'll get into that a little bit too. The decisional balance would be a good example. Decisional balance, you know, that 4-box quadrants of the pros of changing, the cons of changing, the pros of not changing, the cons of not changing. You know, a wonderful exercise to help somebody in many ways, if for nothing else than simply to contemplate the idea of changing. What they found is that because it is powerful and it is equally balanced, each one of those quadrants, it doesn't help a person make progress toward the change. Okay, so a useful practice for the decisional balance is with a change that somebody's making that I don't have any business really participating in. You know, should I get married or not? I don't want to be involved in that choice. I don't want to hear Kevin said, no, I don't want to hear that anyway. But, you know, if it's something that is just purely up to the person's autonomy and free will, that's one thing. If it's something that it is, I'm ethically bound to help this person because it's going to prevent harm, that would be an example of where I would choose to use MI, and the decisional balance changes drastically. The boxes basically are different sizes. So we emphasize way more the language in support of change, and we diminish the language in support of the status quo. And that's what we're going to look at today around how does one go about doing that? Empathy. You know, this is not something of MI at all. This empathy has been empathy since empathy was empathy. And it is part and parcel, obviously, of any good human interaction. And we all don't have the same definition of that word. This will be another theme that we encounter that you undoubtedly have encountered in your work with humans, that we rarely do we have a common shared language, even when we're speaking the same language. Our definitions of a word might be different. Empathy's come out as being one of those. There's a book that is entitled Against Empathy, or Argument Against Empathy, which just takes you aback. But I found after reading it, I agree with him. And it's because of his definition of the word empathy. I cannot remember who it is, but if somebody wants to look that up, it's out there. And it ends up being kind of the same point, in my opinion. It is that the perspective that this author is taking on the idea of empathy is very different than what my understanding and experience of empathy is. So I would say, if that person's definition is correct, I agree with them. You know, so food for thought. Great.
Kevin, there's a question Ari
Yeah.
Ortiz asked, just for an example. Could you give an example of a low empathy?
A low empathy? Why? So, okay, let me put it in context. Well, let's say you're meeting the second time with I'm a drug and alcohol counselor, by the way, by trade. And so that's off the top of my head. That's a lot of the examples I go to that say I'm meeting with somebody for the second time. The first time was the intake, which was a long, kind of drawn out, clipboardy kind of thing. And now it's the first, it's like a kind of a confirm the treatment plan session, right? And I got commitment talk off the chart from this client in the intake. They made a solemn oath that they were going to never drink again and they're going to go to meetings, and they had a specific plan. They come back, and I asked them about that, and they didn't do any of it. And they're fine. And they even say, you know, I actually had a drink last night. My response is, why? If that is my response, that feels very different than, and you came here anyway. Or I can't imagine what it must have been like to try to walk through the door today to talk to me about this. I appreciate what it took to say that, given our conversation last time. Those feel very different. That would be an off-the-cuff example of empathy. If others have experience on that, I'd invite you to throw that into the chat. Absolutely. Steve, was that your hand?
I was trying to give a thumbs up, but I hit the hand button.
Well, it was there.
Yeah,
there were 4 other fingers too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my take anyway on empathy. It's like one example that encapsulates all of MI. Also, person-centered, which is kind of, again, it's a phrase. Person-centered counseling is a thing. When in motivational interviewing, they're trying to not only be academic and clinical in communicating this way of being with people, that it is not just for clinicians. Okay, it's for anyone who's with somebody who's ambivalent, and the helper feels responsible in like a conscience way of helping this person change in a good way. MI, that is where MI is born of, and it just so happens to be extremely useful in clinical situations too. Let's see where I'm at with these. Oh, okay. So that's where this, who is making the argument for change in this? Is it me giving them reasons, or are they giving me reasons? That's a good way of kind of self-test kind of in the moment, which is encouraged to do a lot while walking with a person in the way of MI. Why? Because it often is counter habitual. My habit is to do what I always do, which is kind of get in there, especially if they say something that is so obviously not correct. Like, alcohol is not addictive. I don't believe that at all. I blah, 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 you know, whatever. That's a kind of an extreme example, but actually that's a good one, because if I'm in a session with somebody who says that, oh boy, it's kind of on. And yet motivational interviewing would invite me to resist the impulse to engage that debate with that person. It would encourage me exactly to resist the impulse to debate. Instead, is there a way to dance with that? Instead of wrestling with that person, you know, instead of riding the canoe, see, it's a reflex. If they're going to tip the boat over, I don't want to flip over in the boat with them. So I'm going to like correct it. That's the image they use in the text, is the writing reflex. It's the reflex in us that pops up when somebody says something like that. Or even like less dramatic, but like it's kind of like genuinely, they don't really have a proper understanding of something, and we want to get in there and help them understand that by correcting it, writing it. This is a new development since 2013 in MI, that is something that has been identified as one of the subtle ways that connection can be eroded. If somebody feels like they're being corrected, or kind of, it's hard to really use words because it goes down rabbit holes, but the idea of writing reflex as a way that is not MI is very useful. Is it wrestling or is it dancing? How does this conversation feel? There's in the opposite direction, there's a tendency to in MI to just like having, like, say, when I just learned about the writing reflex, my mission in life was to never do it. I just got it in my head that it's a rule. It means that you're not a good MI clinician, and by golly, I'm going to be good at it. So if anything, I'm not going to do the writing reflex. And so I'd go do recordings. This is kind of when you really, if you start geeking out on MI and you want to get like overtrained in it, you can get a coach. I wouldn't say overtrained. I would recommend everybody get a coach. I wanted to get good at it. So they have you record sessions with willing participants who are talking about real things. So it's not role play. And then the coach listens to the tape with you. And so that's what I did the first tape. I tried anything but do the writing reflex, and I succeeded. What did the coach say to me? Well, nothing about the writing reflex. Went straight into the last, second to last bullet point. You're cuddling the problem. By the way, not a very MI comment. And I told her that. It's like, that's not very MI. And I've remembered it ever since. It didn't feel good. And she's like, well, you're not my client. But I love the phrase, though, that when we kind of try too hard to not be anti-person centered, then there's a risk of walking in the direction of enabling when it's not exactly enabling. She calls it cuddling the problem. All we're doing is talking about the woe is me, the sucks list. The sucks list is where I begin with anyone who's ambivalent in a negative way, where they don't want to be there and they have to be here. And I just let them talk. What sucks? Let's just run through the list. What sucks? Really? Yes, let's do it. Don't explain them. Let's just name them. We'll come back and we'll dive into each one of them. Sweet. Well, you get a huge list. Cuddling the problem would be staying there and not going anywhere with it. Like just say, wow, that must be so difficult, and not really taking it to the level that it needs to go to for whatever reason. We don't have to cuddle the problem. We can actually get in there and influence. Maybe that's the point, in fact. Motivational interviewing is not neutral. It is directive. I am biased. I am biased as a counselor, and I consciously and transparently apply my bias in the relationship with this person because it was the agreement. See, this is where clinically informed consent, that there is not a hidden aspect to this. It is in treatment. For whatever reason, I'm in treatment because I say I need to be in treatment, even if it's because somebody else made me do it. I'm here, and there is this understanding that my job is to help a person make good changes around drugs and alcohol. I wouldn't be doing my job otherwise. So being directive is not only allowed, it's kind of expected in motivational interviewing, though we would probably use a different word than directive all the time. It's more a continuum. Directing, guiding, following. We use them all. I always think of a Sherpa mountain, somebody who's been up the mountain a million times, and then somebody who's new. I'm not going to do it for them. I'm going to walk right alongside them, and I'm going to listen carefully and deeply to them. And then when they have a question, or they're not sure, or they're hitting second thoughts, then I'm going to turn to them. And I'm going to listen deeply, question with strategy to help them stay in the tension of their own ambivalence. Because it's possible to resolve ambivalence in the other direction, just to say F it and commit to the status quo. And that's the risk we have at least in clinical work. So then there's the writing reflex. Those are just some, this is really the overview of MI. here's the spirit of MI as put forth in the text. The top 3 circles, compassion, partnership, acceptance, that's Carl Rogers. Before 1981, that's what there was for person-centered. There was no MI, so there wasn't a 4th one. How MI is distinct is that 4th circle, the one that says evocation, placed firmly underneath, founding the top 3. It's like it's like one of those one-wheeled skateboards. I don't know if you guys have those where you're at, but big wide tire right on the ground. Traction. Evocation is the traction of a change process from an MI point of view. It is what makes it different than anything else out there, as far as we know, in terms of clinical approaches, like official approaches. Nothing else names evocation as the heart and soul of its philosophy or map. The text goes even deeper into acceptance, breaks it down into 4 more categories, all starting with A. And the co-founders will say, if you're training a group of people in motivational interviewing, if you don't get past this in a week training, you have succeeded. If you do only the spirit of motivational interviewing and don't get to all the other, even like the kind of technical stuff, that is success. Because motivational interviewing is not about learning a technique. It must begin with, I mean, it's kind of what it is a way of being. And yes, it will look like certain behaviors just wouldn't fit with that. So it's much easier to describe the behaviors of MI in terms of what they are not than what they are, because the sky is kind of the limit in terms of what you can do.
Kevin?
Yes.
I think we have a participant named Linda who wants to make a comment.
Linda, yes, please.
Here she
Hi,
comes.
Linda.
Yeah.
There we go. Hi. I just have a question. I shared at the first meeting that
I remember, yeah.
yes,
Well,
I actually came to realize that my book is the 3rd edition, and I must have learned motivational interviewing in that transitional year in 2013.
okay.
But so I'm wrangling with some adjustments of language, like, the word ambivalence, and as opposed to resistance and those things. But if you could go back a couple of slides to where you be back one more there, stop there. Oops,
Definition.
nope. The next one.
This one?
Sorry, yes.
Got it.
So I learned, not just in motivational interviewing, but in my education prior to that, I learned already to resist the writing routine.
Sure.
And so I'm not sure that I definitely was doing that even when I was learning motivational interviewing. So I'm not sure that I really understand what cuddling the problem looks like. So could
Fair.
you share an example of that, like at a conversation where you are cuddling the problem?
Sure.
Or thank you.
Sure. Steve, would you be willing to be a client?
I never thought I never thought you'd ask. Sure.
So, and I'm going to cuddle your problem.
Okay.
So, be an ambivalent person in treatment.
Yep.
And so where should we start, Steve?
Let me get into the character here. Yeah. What's up, Kevin?
So where would you like to begin, Steve?
I don't know. I don't even know why I'm here. This is ridiculous. I don't have a problem. I'm not even sure what's going on. I'm not planning to stop using. I don't even know if I'm going to do this, this whole treatment, all these treatment classes. So that's just where I'm at. And, you know, I'm gonna, in fact, I may go get lit after our session. So that's just where I'm at.
You got a lot going on then.
Yeah, maybe.
Sounds like part of why you're here might not be all from your own will, as it were, Steve.
That's for sure.
Okay. So maybe somebody's nudging you in here.
Yeah, it's more than nudging. It's either here or jail. So.
Oh, the free choice. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you're in a pickle where it's a choice between jail or treatment. Great choice to have.
Yeah, man, it's not good. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump through the hoops. I'm going to be
Sure.
on paper for a while. So I really don't know what the point is. I don't have a problem. So, you know.
Right. You don't have a problem. And so it's just the law. That's the reason you're here, is because that's what the manual says. So do you, is there any way that we can make this useful for you?
I don't know, but just all you got to do is let my probation officer know I showed up, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I don't want to quit using. I'm stressed out. I'm not feeling very well about my job. So there's a lot going on, and
It's hard to quit when you're in high stress.
yeah, I'm not sure if I want to quit. So, I mean, like I said, I can get away with drinking a little bit and usually not get caught. So it's not a big deal.
So
I'm a
you had
grown
some
man. I don't need to give it all up. I'm not a kid.
Yeah, so it's like okay, so some trouble sounds like happened related to drinking, and that's not the norm for you. Typically, you can handle it.
I can handle it. Yeah. I mean, I got this, it's the harder drugs and some of the people I associate with. That's what jams me every single time.
So
It's
you
not
said
me.
you said that you got a lot of stress going on, and that's one of the reasons that you need that alcohol, drugs even are honestly like a coping skill for you right now.
Yeah, both my roommates, use heavily. I'm doing pretty well compared to them. So
Sure.
it's ridiculous.
And are they part of the stress?
Well,
Is
yeah,
that
I'm around it all the time. They got people coming and
Oh,
going. I mean, it's crazy.
okay. Okay. So they're alone. Environment, as we say, alone. Environment. It's just way too much of a challenge.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I'm hearing there's a lot of stress going on. Like
Oh, yeah.
that's one piece, but then there's what you got going on in your life. Since we just met, I'm just curious if you'd be willing to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I don't know if you can help me, brother, because I don't really need help. I can figure this out on my own. But, I don't have a problem, and I don't really need any help. So
Okay.
I'm not sure where this will go.
Well, like we did in the intake and or like was done in the intake, you got kind of admitted into this. And okay, so maybe that was a legal thing, a required thing, and now you got to be here.
Yeah.
Well, if for nothing else, maybe this can be a place for you just to talk it out. And that's what, if you don't want to say anything, that's cool. Obviously, you got your own free will in this. But I can just tell you're stressed. Like there's stuff going on, and if you need to talk about it, this can be a safe place for you to do that.
Okay.
Let's cut it right there. Okay. Because I thank you, Steve. Good job. Oh wow. It's like that's coming from somewhere. Just Oscar clip. So okay, Linda. Well, Linda, what now? Can you see? I was trying to cuddle the problem by staying only on the arguments for the status quo. That's what that's what that phrase is referring to. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So there were a couple, there were a couple moments, things that Steve said, where he was just teeing up an opportunity to engage him and evoke the reasons to make the change with alcohol. And I'm curious if you might have identified some places there too, where you, as a practitioner, would also have said different things than I did just there.
It's interesting because you certainly gained a lot of information about what's really going on with him. And my struggle in that situation, as I thought about what I might say, was a little confrontational, and not wanting to try to right the wrong. I don't want to get into an argument with him, but I saw opportunities to say, you know, how do you think, not having a problem, how did you end up in this situation with the law? You know, what
There's a discrepancy there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like
because to me,
highlighting
that's what motivational interviewing, as I learned it, taught me to do, was lead people to see their own, what's the word? There is a word for this, discrepancy, their own, you
That's
know, what they're seeing and what they're doing and what they're
Yes.
saying don't align. And through recognizing that, they talk themselves into which way they should be going.
Beautifully put.
So
Great explanation of developing discrepancy. You know,
yeah.
formerly a go-to category in motivational interviewing, second edition, 100%. I remember that even just going through school and having that one day of MI, that's the thing I remembered, was develop discrepancy. I'm not even sure I knew what that meant. So I really appreciate your definition of that. But
so
absolutely.
how do we do that without how do we do that in edition 3, if you will?
I so appreciate that question.
Okay.
For this reason, you don't have to change a thing.
Okay.
Because I'm not going to tell Steve, okay, so now I'm going to develop discrepancy with you. I'm just going to do it, right? I'm just going to get in there and influence that conversation to bring him face to face with that conflict. Here's my behavior. Here's what I'm saying. They don't match up. And I'm going to just allow him to experience that in vivo. That is still an excellent application of motivational interviewing.
And not cuddling the problem.
That would be a perfect example of not cuddling the problem, because what you're doing is it's one part of a larger move. It's a larger strategy, as I heard you say, that by setting up the discrepancy, they start talking about it and hearing themselves talk, basically use it's hard to deny their own BS, for lack of a better term right now.
Yes.
That, especially when someone's witnessing it. So you know, it's a skillful use of open-ended questions, sometimes affirmations, reflections, to bring them to that place. That often is the case, especially in quote unquote denial situations, the artist formerly known as denial, where I don't have a problem, you know, pre-contemplation, maybe some contemplation, you know. In other words, arguments.
Maybe some pre-contemplation.
Pre-contemplation. Yeah.
They're really
pre to the second power. Yes. In other words, they're not making a commitment to change today, right? This is all part of a larger strategy on your part to eventually you're going to bring them to that, and you're not going to run ahead of them. If they stay right there and they're not really ready to get into that, then what MI would suggest is continue. You know, if it's too much, they'll let you know. So I guess what I'm trying to say, Linda, is that still is MI.
Okay.
That in fact, you can even use the term. You know, maybe I'm overemphasizing that piece on language. The point around the third edition was more that the spirit was not named yet by the authors officially. And so they named it, and part of the practice-based evidence from doing trainings, from 10 years of practicing MI, was starting to see that there may be a way to teach MI with different language that would help improve our ability to do exactly what you're saying. So the actual move doesn't even look different. It's always been MI. We're just using different ways of kind of describing it to people that might not know it yet.
Thank
So an
you.
example,
That was very helpful. I mean, continue, but
great question.
Thank you very much, Linda. I have one other question from Cheryl, and then I think just for to honor the time,
Yes.
let's keep moving, Kevin. But Cheryl, did you have a question for Kevin, or a comment?
Hi, Cheryl. I think Cheryl's on mute too.
See if she can unmute herself.
I'm going to advance some slides here in the interest of time as well.
Cheryl, are you able to unmute, or maybe okay, she can't unmute.
Oh, bummer.
Let's see if she
Well,
had a question.
if you write it out, that'd be great. I was just going to name this slide as a part of review as well, that there are 4 basic moves to MI. No matter what we're talking about in the process, these are the activities of motivational interviewing, largely. Is this only it? Of course not. Largely, this is what gets practiced when I'm trying to get better at MI. Open, meaning open-ended questions. Really, it should be questions. Affirmations, reflections, and then summaries, okay? When I'm in the first phase of a motivational interviewing process, when I first meet someone, for example, if you look at the left of this slide, it's a staircase. These are 2 separate kind of pictures here, okay? So on the left side, there's a staircase, 4 steps. Engagement is the fundamental. It is where we begin. If I don't have connection with the person that I'm interacting with, I'm not going to be able to do the next 3 phases. I'm not really going to be able to do much useful stuff if I don't have engagement. So for, you know, in the example of working with Steve, it was important to me to stay in the technical bounds of MI while working with him. Because that'd be another aspect of cuddling the problem. It's not that I'm bad. I'm not a bad clinician. I'm just not using the whole picture. So by using open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, I can only focus on the reasons to not change. Now, in motivational interviewing, one of the discrepancy activities is a double-sided reflection. So in the example of Steve, on one hand, you were forced to be here. And on the other hand, there's some things going on in your life that might be worth talking about. So there's 2 things being reflected there. One is the argument for not changing, followed by, same time, potentially an argument for changing. Now, it's a guess on my part because we didn't get far enough into it, but that's also okay. You can guess and you can be wrong. Why? Because if you're wrong, they will tell you. that means they will talk more. They will explain what they mean more. You want that. Evoke, evoke, evoke. So it's a simple objective, simple objective. And if, so in the spirit of engaging, it's something we do. I want to engage properly. I want to be person-centered. So I'm not going to try to argue with this person about why they should change. That can end up filling an entire hour or maybe entire weeks of sessions of following a person while they smear their complaints all over themselves and me. You know, that's what I mean by cuddling the problem. So there's a necessary moment of acknowledging that this person is going through something, and I'm going to accept it. Right? I'm not going to say ew or why or come on. You know, no. I'm going to, as best I can, unconditional positive regard, even if, you know, it's a situation like what Steve just presented. Often that can be a challenging conversation to have because it's like, well, for many reasons. It's just the very beginning. It might be very necessary in order to gain connection with Steve by really communicating to him through empathy, reflecting back to him what he's saying and accepting it. I might need to do that. That's not cuddling the problem. It's just that if that's the only place I stay, that would be an example of incomplete, like not a whole approach that's MI, but it's not necessarily out of bounds with MI. All the moves are still there. Not many questions, a lot of reflections, that kind of thing. So it's a bit tricky.
And I would say, Kevin, you know, that character that I was playing was waiting for you to start to tell me what to do or not to do, or to make me do something. And institutional patient Steve, you know, oppositional defiant Steve was just waiting for that. And it didn't happen. So it allowed me to sort of let down my defenses a little. And eventually, I think creating some of that dissonance and discrepancy would have led me back to coming up with my own solutions, perhaps, for which path I follow.
It's a really good point, Steve, and thank you for reminding me to check in with you on how that went. That's something that, I mean, it's a lot. MI training should be in the spirit of MI. And so whenever somebody takes a risk like that, come back to them, affirm it. You took a risk, you stepped up. I asked you in public in front of 1,000, how many people we have? 101 people, and you did it.
Well, and in this mode, remember, we can't see the audience, Kevin. So it was just like you and me in a session.
Yeah,
so
I know. It always is, Steve. It's just so easy, you know. But to affirm that, but also to check in with you on what was it like for you to be that client, like you were just saying, because so it's important to hear the experience of receiving somebody who's coming to you with motivational interviewing. So you say that you were fully ready to be oppositional defiant, and
I was ready for you to make me do something. And
all right,
you know, that I think is that old approach to, as the clinician, I'm often self-imposed with this task of I have to make this person do something. And once that is lifted, it changes the dynamic completely.
Exactly. So I was going to try that. This can be like a good example. As Steve was just talking right there, I wonder if people have noticed I've been trying to do something with him by asking him about his experience, and especially that piece around that he disclosed part of his character. Like, I'm an oppositional defiant type. I'm up for a fight. I'm expecting a fight, and I'm just waiting for it. That's what he said in my hearing. And I could feel in me, because of trying to present MI, and yet, yeah, I wanted him to say, and you didn't do that. Here's the thing. That's not mine to say. It comes from the person having the experience. This is a perfect example. I don't know if anybody felt that or observed it. That's a motivational interviewing moment right there. There's an opportunity to evoke from the other person what I would normally just throw in there. Nothing wrong with it. Nothing wrong with, say, Steve said, I'm ready for a fight. And then I could say, and yet it didn't happen. That's a good reflection. That's a complex reflection. A complex reflection is when you say something that actually takes that person's fact and expands on it, adds another sentence onto the end of it, maybe imagines what the rest of that paragraph would be if they kept talking, and just say it back to them. Doesn't matter if you're right, you can be in ballpark, get the bat on the ball, and it keeps the ball going. In fact, it makes it deeper. So that's an example of opportunity. Like I want to draw that out by reflecting it back to them. Or I can't remember what I did. Oh, I just went, and you know, and yet it's obvious, because his point is obvious, that how many people do we have that are coming in there adversarial? Even if it's friendly, the friendly visitor. I'm a 10. Happy to be here. How's that local sports team? And then it never goes anywhere. These are manifestations of ambivalence. The exception, and Linda touched on this, the exception to ambivalence as the way of conceptualizing my conversation is when, say, Steve, in that example, what if I said something like, well, you obviously are here for some reason. I mean, what, did you get in trouble for drinking? And then he comes back at me with his oppositional defiant and he says, Steve, give me one. Just start wailing on me.
I would have said, no, that's not why I'm here. My friends got the cops called, and the cops came. I had a few, and I ended up getting arrested. So it wasn't me.
Okay, so it wasn't you. But if I came back with like even worse, and it starts getting personal, like you feel it. Now, I want to be sure I'm still in MI. So I say something else like highlighting that, okay, you're going to blame other people. And I'll say it nicely. And then you take it personally.
Yeah.
Then what would you say if you took it personally because of something I did?
I might say, this is bullshit, man. I'm out. I'm out of here.
Thank you, sir. That is an example of, see, look at this. A perfect, outstanding example of ambivalence resolved for the status quo. That is outstanding, sir. He committed to going to jail and drinking himself into oblivion in about 15 minutes, all because of what I said. From an MI point of view, I'm responsible for what I said there. If I'm claiming MI, I'm claiming I know, and I say that, and that's the result, I'm going to claim responsibility for that. That is not an ambivalent moment anymore. In fact, we're stepping out of MI at that point because the relationship is ruptured. You go back to the left side of this slide. Engagement has left the building with Steve. Okay, so I mean, this is a broad brush example of what third edition MI talks about in changing the language from resistance language to ambivalence language. Okay, you can still use the word resistance. It's not allowed. It's simply like a way of kind of approaching that seems less pathologizing, perhaps. Any other things in the chat you're noticing, Steve?
There's a few questions that are coming in the Q&A. Ray had a question that I encouraged him to put out there if maybe we have a minute to address that. Just wanted to talk about defense mechanisms. Ray?
I'm going to sort through these slides while we do this, just to guess we're not going to get to an activity, and that's that was a lofty goal, I might even talk about this a little bit. Really appreciate the demo example though, Steve. Just like kind of living it out a little bit in a very authentic way, because it shows a feel for what we're talking about. That even what I did there, when we were trying to make an example of cuddling the problem, that actually is an example of engagement. That's not bad engagement. If you think of it in terms of, well, more was revealed after that. There were maybe more of that session, a couple other sessions, decided to come back, and then it went somewhere. That would be a strategic version of it, engagement. Ray's here. Hi, Ray.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you are. But thanks for unmuting me there. Steve, I imagine, did that. I couldn't find the control to unmute myself to respond. But, early on in the field of addictions or alcoholism in particular, among the basic teachings in alcoholism, treatment was the concepts related to the defense mechanisms, denial and all that.
There you go. Yeah.
Related to it. And so my question goes to the practice of MI. And probably I think this relates more probably to the discussion of ambivalence. And the relevance or the application of these defense mechanism concepts to the practice of MI. That's where my question is coming from. Because I see the word denial tossed in a lot in these discussions around MI. And I'm aware that Dr. Miller, for example, was one who did not appreciate that use of the word denial. Yeah,
okay.
But denial is part of the defense mechanism package that was taught early on in the field of alcoholism and alcoholism treatment. So that's my question.
I've come alongside to your point of view, Ray, because I came in, it was like a contentious issue. It was kind of the contentious, I remember a family member, before I even was interested in counseling, they went to treatment. They kind of had to for various reasons. And I remember talking to them at one point, just chatting with them. And honestly, they needed treatment. They were not in a good way. And they were just complaining about it. I mean, I'm 16 years old at that time. I was like, well, I don't even remember what I said, but whatever it is sparked it in him where he said, look, I don't like people telling me what to do and telling me I'm in denial. And that colored my approach to counseling after that, thinking, well, I don't want to be that person. That's honestly, I think that it's a bit of a pejorative to assume that that's the way people are using the concept of denial, because it's actually a beautiful concept if you consider it in its original context, which I think you're referring to, the natural defenses, right? And
there's other defense mechanisms, that are often used in learning and teaching of MI, I think, and regression, rationalization. I think there are other defense mechanisms that pop up a lot.
No, that's a good point.
In terms of counselors or therapists attempting to describe where a patient is and their ambivalence, or what we refer to as ambivalence, and so that's where I'm coming from around my question. I don't see a lot of discussion around this in MI training, and I think is worthy of a discussion as we get into this topic. Thank you.
I very much appreciate that, Ray. That you're giving me ideas actually for future experiences. That because part of it is I recognize what you're saying in me. That it's denial can be looked at in a disparaging way, like if you use it somehow. And this may be part of this, may be definitions. What do we mean by just naming it denial? Is it the way that we are with the client? Is it maybe we're in a staff meeting and we're doing a conceptualization? Like, honestly, I still do that. I mean, well, we all kind of do in staffings and conceptualizations, and it's never pushed back on. Doing it with a client, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what I haven't really reflected deeply on that, and that's what it's drawing it out of me. I want to do
Mhm.
that. Like, start
Mhm.
conversations about that. Like, what does the group think about this? Anybody use denial, like, as a strategic approach in their treatment, and how, and what ways is it effective? Maybe what are the risks of it? Perhaps that'd be a more effective way to talk about MI in that way, instead of being adversarial about the concept and saying that that's bad. Like, because that's what I hear Bill saying, is that he didn't approve, he doesn't like the use of the word.
Mhm.
And uh, I wonder if it's more not liking the um, the disengagement that a misuse of that would be. Because I'm thinking, like, rationalization, we use
Mhm.
that all the time. We just
Mhm.
teach about thinking errors. Maybe
Mhm.
that's what it's done. It's just transferred into other language. We call them
Yeah.
thinking errors now.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, yes, so sometimes I think that as we take a person-centered approach, uh, one of the things we there hasn't been conceptualized in the person-centered approaches is how these defense mechanisms, these classic defense mechanisms, relate or maybe even don't relate to a person-centered approach.
that's a
Um,
phenomenal
yeah,
question.
and my thinking is that when we talk about um, regression or denial or rationalization, that those are more often than not a clinician's defenses showing up, uh,
Hmm.
and their attempt to be person-centered, but also uh, feeling a need to be more directive. So,
Uh, Supervision,
mhm,
motivational interviewing and supervision.
mhm,
That's a phenomenal topic, because they're that whole conversation around um, how to bring this necessary piece of helping a person overcome whatever it is that's standing in the way of making a change. So in a
mhm,
way, motivational interviewing is just totally changing the flavor of the conversation with its language. And
mhm,
yet I'm trying to think of any case where somebody goes through, does the change, makes the commitment, and they don't talk to me about their denial.
mhm,
They talk to me about their regression. They talk to me about all the ways they've rationalized things.
mhm,
And I do get in there. I do talk, and then I start teaching about denial. And
mhm,
then I can use examples. I remember when we first met, you were saying things like this, and it occurred to me that, stuff like that. Another point comes up, Ray, that is good for just generally, like, the basics of MI. The research shows 4 sessions tops.
mhm,
4 sessions tops of motivational interviewing. So when I'm in treatment, that's the beginning of the treatment experience.
mhm,
Whatever comes after that, it can be MI. There's just no evidence in terms of research to support that that's going to influence the change process any more than anything else would.
mhm,
So it's an important piece where this is a relatively fast process, that if it's 4 sessions and we're still in ambivalence, then that's where the person is at. Does that
mhm,
mean I give up? No, not at all. But by then we should have engagement. By then we should have a focus. Like we have, like, by 4 sessions, I would want
mhm,
to have as a rule of thumb, I would want to have a horizon, so that we've named it. And that's
mhm,
the other piece that I wanted to name today, is that having a specific focus, even if we're in drug treatment, where at some point one of us is going to say, I'm looking at changing my meth use, like that specific, right? Maybe it
right,
would be me saying, would it be okay with you if I just reflected on this for a second and reset? You know, that's asking for permission to do that, and then saying, it sounds like you're looking at changing your drinking. And then you get a conversation out of that. If there's agreement, perfect. There's the focus, right? That happens in 4 sessions. Usually before that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Those things are, it seems to me that there is room and kind of a necessity of incorporating what we know about the psyche into a psychotherapeutic process. I wonder if it's more the way, like we're thinking very stereotypically especially when I talk about old school treatment. I think of Synanon, where it was like just primordial treatment, where it was like boot camp. Look at Steve. There's his oppositional. And look I'm only talking about it, and he's coming out with, geez. To me, that's what the point is of talking that way. And it really is just more to emphasize that there is true power in making relations with the person you're talking to. Just genuinely connecting with them. Does that mean you have to be a Rogerian? No, not at all. And that's something that I think even Bill Miller, I almost said Bill Wilson, that's what Bill Miller, Stephen Rolnick, they would not disagree. There is no manual. There is no, you must do this, and this, other than engagement, focus. You get those 2 and then draw out the reasons to change. The whole idea is to draw out the arguments to make the change from the person. It can be like a game. You could look at it that way. And there's a lot of different tricks and tips for things to say in that way. My favorite is, what else? I have said that in groups where it was like uncomfortable silence. There's no momentum at all. Nothing has been done. And I'll just say, what else? Somebody will say something. Just draw out positive or ways of trying to arrive at the arguments for making the change. They already have both sides of the argument in their mind. We don't need to give it to them. They will give it to us when it's time. This is the motivational interviewing style. But if it's evocative and engaging and focused, there's a lot of wiggle room there for how that gets done. Linda, you're back.
Yeah, I just I don't like the use of the word denial either, because for me, denial, the use of the word denial is me as a clinician making a judgment call. And I'm judging what that person is expressing. When I think about motivational interviewing, I think about it's not my place to be judgmental. It's my place to engage this person in relationship. And so to me, there's value in motivational interviewing in recognizing that resistance of any kind or ambivalence of any kind is value to the person who's expressing it. And it may be not a healthy value. It may be, I might personally recognize that this is not helpful for that person, but it's that person to understand that. And ambivalence happens for a reason. So here in, it's why is that person in quote unquote denial? It's serving a purpose for him. And so getting to the bottom of what that purpose is, and is it valuable, is really key. Does that make sense? Or
Absolutely.
Okay.
I appreciate how you even kind of preempted yourself there by saying him. It's just it highlights the mindset. We have language that we use, and then we'll catch things that we're about to say or thinking about saying, and then really emphasize the person-centered. You hear that all the time.
Yes.
And it's the little things like that. So just much appreciated, Linda.
Right.
Judy.
Linda.
Thank you to Ray. Was it Ray? I think.
Yes,
to
thank you,
bring
Ray.
that up.
Food for
Awesome.
thought. Absolutely.
Judy had her hand up. I don't know, Judy, if you want to make a quick comment too, with Kevin and the group.
Oh, there's 106 participants, so we count off by 53.
We'll keep Judy on if she wants to chime
enough.
in, but
So maybe in terms of time, we're getting there. We're coming to the end of our time. Is that correct, Steve?
yeah, we're about
I heard yes. I lost your, I think you just muted. You went mute.
so about 6-7 minutes before the bottom of the hour.
Okay, so I had some activities in here that we're obviously not going to be able to get to, but here's one where and really the point of these is to have an experience of the spirit of MI. So in this one, we would pair you off, or in threes, where you have an observer, and one person is making a real change. We always invite people to talk about something that they really are truly contemplating changing, if it's safe and comfortable for them to do so. If it needs to be a role play, fair, and we just present the principle that a real play in experience seems to be more effective in just really driving home the feel. But just talk like we usually talk with somebody that we're trying to persuade. That doesn't mean be a jerk. It just means like, actually, blah, blah, I've noticed this about you because I know you really well, blah, 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 blah. Or just being a cheerleader, go, 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 you can do it, and really try to get them to change. So when we do this, people will come back and will be kind of like sheepish almost and say, I actually felt like I wanted to change. Was that supposed to happen? Yeah, it kind of was. Because then we go on to the next round where you do it again, same exact ambivalence, same exact problem, that the whole spirit of it changes. Instead of focusing on the change, I'm going to focus on that person, and that person is my relationship with that person is my value at a deeper level than them changing even. And whatever that feels like to you, right? Even just considering trying to do that, that's like considering that, and then attempting to use language and use relational activity to engage that person in that way. This is where we'll start. It's like a way to practice some ORs, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries. If I leave you with one thing today, it is affirmations are incredibly powerful when done well. A recognition of the value of the strength present in a person as evident by something they just said to you or did. By highlighting that and squaring up to them and saying, strong, whatever way that you say it, but that is a genuine, no doubt about it affirmation, people don't forget that. It can be very difficult for them to accept it. That is so basic just to being a good counselor, to being a person who is influential in people's lives, like a mentor. We just do that, right? What MI would say is try to make that a way of life, professionally at least. We often hear, well, I already do this. Yeah, that's true. Just do it all the time. When it comes to helping somebody change, just do it all the time. Skipping focus. We talked about that a little bit. Evocation is the main piece of MI, and in trainings and webinars, We don't really get to practicing it or talking about it, mostly because the moves are exactly the same. Open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, with the exception of, now that we have a focus, I start leaning into the guiding aspect of this. I start becoming differential in the ways I use these. Instead of equal parts status quo and change talk, when I hear status quo argument, I'm going to say things with these tools to soften that and guide them and have them look more at the arguments to change. No matter what they say, I want them to say the next thing is an argument for change. That's what evocation is. Simple, not easy. Takes a lot of practice. Takes a lot of practice. I wonder if anybody has experience of that. Maybe throw that in. Ambivalence, we looked at that video last time. People jumping off the high dive, or at least saying they will. That's noticed any ambivalence this year? You know, there was a question last time about you know, recognizing any kind of demographic group, any kind, as being more ambivalent than another. And I've really been thinking about that a lot since the last webinar. And I gotta say, I don't see gradations of ambivalence. I don't see gradations. It's kind of binary. It's there or it's not. So pre-contemplative, I'd say that's not ambivalent. Committed. You know, the chair's spinning and they're out the door. That's not ambivalence. If they're in the conversation with me and they're not talking about me and how I'm a jerk, but they're talking about their reasons to change or not, then they're ambivalent. I don't remember qualifying ambivalence into gradation. So I wish I would have, you know, thought about that a little more with that question last time, because it was a really good one. And I just, it just highlighted to me how, at least I perceive it as a universal. All people experience ambivalence. And I don't know if I'm right about that or not. I'll have to look into that more. Planning is the last piece of the process. And frankly, we can plan. We can plan inside and out. It's a requirement at my work anyway, to have a plan before anything. Basically, you have to have a plan by law before the intake is done. From an MI point of view, that's just like, huh? That it's just a different way of thinking. Now, we can have a plan to make a plan. We got all kinds of ways of doing that, no doubt. But the actual, okay, here are the steps I'm going to take to change. By the way, that's the client talking. It's not me telling them. It's a natural progression going from engagement all the way up to planning, where I will partner with this person. They are volunteering to me the activities that they will do. I might need to help them out, like give them ideas, tell them what's possible, that kind of, I mean, that's the process. That is also a whole process. There's this piece on sustain and discord. The types of the stages of change in MI's way, there's only two. So drinking or not drinking. Imagine you're at the altar with booze. Do you take booze to be your lawfully wedded partner? Like Steve just did. He went out and he got hitched to booze because of me. If you hear somebody saying, I went to a meeting yesterday, I haven't drank in 7 days, I am going to go to a meeting, that is language that indicates they're headed toward a commitment and their ambivalence is starting to resolve. If you hear the red words, I need to, do you take this person to be your spouse? I want to. I need to. I got really good reasons to. I could. That's contemplation. They're not committed yet. That's one of the ways to, like, kind of behind the scenes, you can listen no matter what they're presenting to you. If this is what they're really giving you in terms of reasons to change, then you know where you stand. Don't need to teach them that even. Just, it's good to know, you know, because sometimes we run ahead. I think we run ahead into planning when people tell us they're ready to, but they're not. They're still in ambivalence, and it feels very slow to do MI. I think that we're up out of time, Steve. Is it true?
Yeah, we are at the bottom of the hour, and I sure wish we could keep going. Maybe we'll have to consider bringing Kevin back later this year to revisit some of this.
No, it's just getting started.
I know it. I know it. But I do want to thank everyone for joining and participating today. We do want to honor everyone's schedules, and we will reach out to you and make available to you a PDF copy of Kevin's presentation. And we can also offer 1.5 CEUs for today's presentation. So as Ella mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. So we're really thrilled to have everyone here. I want to thank Kevin again for spending the last 90 minutes with us and sharing some knowledge and interacting and allowing me to bring out my oppositional defiant character one more time.
That was my only goal.
I was in the back of my mind. I was ready. I thought I'm going to be ready.
I knew it.
I
knew it. You got a good one.
And until we meet again, we'll broadcast another behavioral health webinar next month at this time on March 17th. Until then, everybody, please take care of yourselves. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and we'll meet again. Okay?
I'll send these slides out too, by the way, if you want them.
Okay.
So I just kind of ran through those to show everybody.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank
All
you.
right. So long, everybody.
All right.
Okay. I don't know if we're off or not.
All right, I'll end the call. Thank you guys. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Kevin.
Thank you.
See
Thank
ya.
you. Y'all take care.
You too.